All right, moving on to section 43 notes. Before I get into anything today, we are talking about percents. On the very top of this page, you can see I wrote is over of is equal to percent over 100. I'll be using this setup quite a bit on these problems, so I kind of want to explain what's going on. All percents are out of 100. The word percent means per 100. Is over of represents the part over the whole. So if you look kind of like this equals, is represents the percentage in the problem, of represents the whole. I'll be referring to this frequently as we're going through here. Now these questions can be tricky, mainly because there's multiple things to do to get to the answer you're looking for. So if you take a look at this first one, number 1. In 2005, the USGS conducted a survey to investigate water usage in the United States. The following table shows their findings. So you can see a big list, categories of water usage. It's agricultural, domestic, industrial, irrigation, livestock, mining, public supply, thermoelectric, and the percentages. Now, if you add up all these percentages, it's going to equal 100% because that represents all the water we use in one day. The question time. This is where all the information comes from. If 3.8 billion gallons of water are used for domestic use per day, approximately how many gallons of water are used for irrigation? Well, the first thing we got to figure out is how much water is used in a day. We don't know the 100% yet. We don't know the 100. What I do know is it says 3.8 billion gallons of water are used for domestic. So using my table up here, domestic represents 1%. So I'm able to set up my first is over of. 3.8 represents 1%. X represents the total that I don't know equals 100. So this is over of equals percent over 100. When I cross multiply, I simply get X is equal to 380. Now, what we didn't mention before is we said it's 3.8 billion, but I'm just using 3.8. I'm just trying to use the numbers. You know, when we have to throw all the zeros in there, sometimes it gets confusing. But for now, I'm just going to say 380 equals how much water they use in a day, and that's 380 billion. The question wants to know how many gallons of water are used for irrigation. So I'm going to go back to the is over of. Look at my table. Irrigation represents 31%. So on my is over of over here, I'm doing 31 over 100, because this is percent over 100. We know now that the total is 380 billion. So now I'm trying to figure out what is 31% of 380 billion. So I cross multiply and I get 100x equals 11,780 billion, really big number. And when I divide by 100, I get 117.8. And again, this is in the billions. So if I'm looking at my answer choices, it's clear that it's going to be B. It says approximately. So again, we're picking the one that's closest to our work. So we're using the is over of, and then this question we're seeing, like on most questions you'll see today on the notes, sometimes these problems are broken into multiple steps. First, you got to find this. Now that you have this, you have to find that. It's the best thing you can do is really read and really understand what they're asking for before you call it a day on the question. Like, did you answer what they were looking for? In this case, I can confidently say, yes, I did. 118 billion represents approximately how much water gallons are used for irrigation. Moving on to question 2, much easier question. A construction crew was made up of 8 men and the rest were women. If 40% of the crew were men, how many people were in the crew? So here's my is over of. They give me percent, 40% out of 100, because it's always out of 100. And the number 8 represents men. So luckily for me, 8 men and 40% are men. So men and men, I can have them equal to each other. 8 men is equal to 40%. I'm trying to figure out how many total people there are. So men and women. We cross multiply, I get 40x equals 800. When I divide, I get 20. That means there were 20 total people. If I wanted to go a step further and say how many women are there, 20 minus 8 is 12. That would represent 60% of the total, but it doesn't ask that. Question number 3. An empty pool has the capacity to hold 2,700 cubic feet of water. A particular hose fills this pool with a water rate at 25 cubic feet per minute. If the hose is placed into the empty pool and turned on, approximately what percent of the pool will be filled after 1 hour? So you can see I've already highlighted the numbers as I was going, and I highlighted the question in a different color. One thing I want to point out is the first thing I try to change. It says that it fills the array 25 feet per minute. The question's asking about hours. Minutes and hours are not the same. So the first thing I do is I take 25 feet per minute and I multiply it by 60 to figure out how many cubic feet are filled up in an hour. So now I have hours. I want to keep all the units the same. So now when I go to my is over of, the question wants to know what percent. So that's why I have the x here, because I always say percent goes over 100, and I don't know it, so it's x over 100. We know that 1 hour represents 1,500 gallons, or cubic feet of water, as I just did my math work over here. 2,700 represents 100% of the pool if it was filled. So each of these numbers has a specific purpose and a place. When I cross multiply, I get 55.5 as my answer. So if I had to approximately pick, I would be picking 56%. And this is one of those questions where you could probably figure that out just by looking at this ratio right here. 10%, 1,500 is more than half. 1,500 times 2 is 3,000. So 1,500 is more than half of 2,700. So it can't be A, that's too small. Can't be D, 93, that's almost the whole thing. It may, 44 or 56, it could come down to those. But again, I just said 1,500 is bigger than 2,700. So that's another way you can kind of approach some of these problems if you're good with percentages and kind of taking a step back and looking at the whole picture there. All right, skipping number 4, and then I'm going to get to number 5. Not one of my favorite questions, but I will cover this one. It says a study of 120,000 randomly selected photos posted to a social media site determined that 4% were selfies, photos of oneself. In the presence of selfies if the presence of selfies is consistent throughout the rest of the photos on the site, and there are 20 billion photos, how many billions of photos on the site were selfies? Write your answer as a fraction. All right, so taking a look at this one, I'm going to change one part about my answer that I don't like here. But as we go through here, you can see I have my is over of set up because, or let me go back to the beginning here. If you look at the part where it says a study of 120,000 randomly selected people, that number is not important for us because all that number was used for is to show us where they got 4% from. So you can see I'm not going to be using 120,000. I will be using 20 billion though as I move forward. So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out what percent of 20 billion, what 4% of 20 billion is. You're going to ignore this 4/5 answer because this isn't right here. But when we cross multiply, first of all I have x over 20. I'm just going to use 20 instead of 20 billion. I don't want to put 9 zeros after this. That's going to be too much. So x over 20, 4 over 100. 4% over 100. This number should always represent the percent. When we cross multiply, I get 100x equals 80. And when we divide, we get 80 over 100, which would reduce to 4/5. But the answer is really 0.8, which represents 800 million. So out of 20 billion photos, there are 800 million selfies, which I believe it or not, I feel is pretty low actually. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this question, honestly. It's fine because we're still setting up the is over of, but the big thing I want you to take away, and even if I scroll back to previous questions, I want you to be able to read a problem, see that there's a percent, know where it goes, see the other number, does it represent the percent or does it represent the whole number, and kind of know where to take it from there. Okay? Your homework assignment is posted on Teams for section 43. Please send me a message if you have questions. Worst comes to worst, on Friday, we can spend the whole day going over these notes and the homework if we have to, and I'm willing to do that if necessary. All right? Please send me questions or concerns you might have on Teams, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All right, guys, good luck.